As time marches on, Digital Extremes continues to release new Warframes. Each successive frame we've seen lately has increasingly more complex mechanics and greater synergy of powers. But what about the old frames? The frames released a long time ago that the devs seem to have long forgotten about. How's it going, everybody? BouseFeenux here, and today I wanted to talk about a few of the frames that I think could use a little love. A few frames that I think need a bit of a rework. Now, this list really isn't in any particular order, so keep that in mind. With that being said, though, let's get started. Our first frame shouldn't come as much of a surprise, honestly. If you were to search him on just about any Warframe forum or watch any video on him, you'll probably hear or see the word rework in that content at some point. If you haven't guessed it yet, our first frame in question is Oberon, who when I first started the game was probably the Warframe I wanted to get the most. Back when I started playing, Oberon was painted as the paladin frame. He had heals, he had damage, he was virtuous, pretty much everything I looked for in a character. You can imagine my disappointment though when I finally farmed enough Xmas units to craft him and saw just how overwhelmingly average he was compared to some of the other Warframes. Now let me say that again, Oberon is average. He isn't really a bad Warframe, but he isn't really that great either. His damage has no scaling to speak of against higher level enemies, and his healing is done more or less over time, which in a fast-paced game like Warframe is almost useless. His abilities are pretty cool and feel unique from one another, but honestly they're all kind of redundant. It's either throw a ball of radiation, make a weird radiation shag carpet for people to shuffle over, heal yourself, or encase your foes in a radiation donut and slam them into the ground. I don't really think these powers need to change per se, but I honestly think that Oberon could do with a bit more scaling to make his damage more viable. Lastly, I feel like he's trying too hard to be too many different things. If his role in the party were more defined, and he had the tweaks I previously mentioned, then I think he could definitely be a strong go-to frame for many players. Next up is another frame I don't think you guys would be surprised to see on this list, and that frame is none other than everyone's favorite tentacle monster master, Hydroid. I'm a huge fan of water-type attacks and elements in video games, and next to Oberon, Hydroid was one of the first frames I set my sights on. I thought it would be super cool to see how DE would implement water-type attacks into this game, and like Oberon, I was really disappointed when I got my hands on Hydroid. I thought I'd be in missions literally wiping the floors with my enemies, only to find out that Hydroid's most common role is that of a loot farmer. That's literally all I've ever seen anyone use this poor guy as, and honestly I think there is so much untapped potential with this frame. Instead of going the damage route with Hydroid, I really think there's potential in maybe switching Hydroid to a crowd control role in the group. I mean, think of the water theme and how that could be used to incapacitate foes. And no, I'm not talking about this goofy puddle thing that reminds me of one of the Wonder Twins who could only turn into a bucket of water or a damp rag or whatever. Hydroid is the Pirate King Warframe to me. Let's get him some fitting abilities, please. Moving on now, this is a frame you might be surprised to see in this list. Her name is Nova, and pretty much everyone, including myself, loves her, and rightfully so. She's got one of the best crowd control abilities in the game, but that's pretty much all she has. Nova has long been a press 4 to win frame, but unlike Ash Prime and a few other Warframes, she for some reason gets a pass for it. I guess what upsets me most here is, like every Warframe on this list, Nova has so much potential wasted. Her other abilities outside of Molecular Prime aren't really used very often. Now, 1 second before you armchair warriors jump to the comments and tell me about how awesome Antimatter Drop is and that I don't know how to use it, I just want to say that I know all about it, so cool the butthurt, please. Anyway, for those of you that aren't familiar, Nova is a fairly old frame and comes from a time when Warframe power synergy didn't really exist, and the game seems to have evolved while leaving behind frames like her. The saving grace to Nova is that her number 4 skill is such a good skill, but I think greatness can always be improved upon, and Nova could be a lot more fun to play than just a press 4 to win frame. What do you guys think? Okay, so you all probably knew this was coming, and I had to put our 4th frame this far down the list because hopefully by now, all of the zealots have gotten bored and clicked off the video. Anyway, that being said, our 4th frame that I think needs a rework is Limbo. Limbo is the weird magician-themed frame that doesn't really seem to fit with the game's Space Ninja motif. Nonetheless, people seem to either love him with undying passion or absolutely hate him. To be totally honest with you guys though, I really don't understand him all that well, so I have really no feelings against him either way. I've played very little of Limbo because he doesn't really appeal to me as a Warframe, and in my opinion, what he can do for a group can pretty much be done better by other frames. My biggest problem with Limbo is that all of his abilities are extremely redundant. They pretty much all do the exact same thing. They're just framed in a different way, but it's not all bad though. I do find Limbo very interesting. I just wish I had more of a reason to play him, and I really feel that he could pretty much use a rework from the ground up. Now, I know that by saying all of this, my video instantly becomes Dislike City, but what's content without a few popular opinions, am I right? Now that we've swallowed the token Limbo needs a rework pill, let's take a look at our last frame. Her name is Nyx, and having her as a Warframe on this list in need of a rework might surprise some of you guys, seeing as she's pretty much my favorite Warframe next to Mesa. That being said, at times I find her incredibly boring to play. As one of the older frames in the game, she suffers from the same chronic one-trick pony syndrome as many of the other Warframes on this list. Like Limbo and Oberon, many of Nyx's abilities are incredibly redundant, and there really isn't a reason to use them unless you're goofing around. Her bread and butter skill is Chaos, though, and essentially it just causes enemies to attack one another. Then you have her Chaos Bolts, which essentially do the same thing indirectly by putting a radiation proc on a small group of enemies and doing a little damage. And here's the kicker. Her first ability, Mind Control, does the same thing, but only with a single target. Now, there are benefits to using Mind Control, but that's besides the point. Nyx's only real unique skill from her other three is honestly her Absorb ability, and in my opinion, that skill doesn't even seem to fit with the theme of her frame. All this being said though, I know DE has really started working hard on revitalizing some of these older frames to try to get them to fit with the new environment of the game, and they're making great progress so far. The frames on this list are just the ones I'd like to see get touched up sooner rather than later. But there you have it, folks. 5 Warframes that need a rework. If you enjoyed watching this video as much as I did making it, then don't forget to leave a like by hitting that thumbs up button below. Also, if you're new here, consider subscribing. I put out new Warframe content more or less daily, and we're almost at 30k subs, which is pretty damn exciting. Until next time though, I'm BouseFeenux. I'll see you at the next video, and as always, thank you so much for watching.